The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has identified 30 high-voltage transformers in the United States that are critical to the functioning of the entire electrical grid, and the simultaneous loss of just 9 of them in various combinations could trigger a cascading failure that results in a coast-to-coast blackout, according to a peer-reviewed assessment published in Energy, Sustainability, and Society. 9 out of a grid that serves 330 million people. And those transformers are not manufactured in the United States. They are custom-built overseas, primarily in South Korea and Germany, and the lead time for replacement is 12 to 24 months per unit. Which means if 9 of them go down at the same time, from a coordinated physical attack, a severe geomagnetic storm, a cyber attack, or a cascading equipment failure during a heat wave, the power does not come back on in a week. It does not come back on in a month. It comes back on in a year, or longer. And the President's National Infrastructure Advisory Council, which is not a prepper blog or a conspiracy website, but a federal advisory body that reports directly to the President of the United States, published a study on surviving a catastrophic power outage that warned the scale of such an event would exceed and exhaust mutual aid resources and capabilities, and would involve not only an extended loss of power, but also a cascading loss of other critical services, including drinking water, wastewater systems, communications, financial services, transportation, fuel, healthcare, and others. Every single system that keeps you alive, that keeps your family safe, that keeps your community functioning, runs on electricity, and what I am going to walk you through in this video is exactly what happens to America, hour by hour, day by day, when the power goes out and does not come back on. Because the people who understand what a grid failure actually looks like are the ones who will be ready when it happens. And the ones who have no idea are the ones who will be standing in line at a gas station that cannot pump gas, in front of an ATM that cannot dispense cash, holding a phone that cannot make a call, wondering how this happened in the richest country on earth. The first 60 minutes, everything electronic dies simultaneously, and the silence is the first warning. The moment the grid fails, everything electrical stops at once, not gradually, not in stages, simultaneously. Your lights go out, your refrigerator stops humming. Your air conditioner or heater goes silent. Your television goes black. Your Wi-Fi router dies. Your phone loses its connection to the cell tower within minutes as the tower switches to battery backup that was designed to last 4 to 8 hours, not days. Traffic signals go dark at every intersection in the affected area, instantly creating confusion, gridlock, and accidents on every major road. Elevators stop between floors. Electric garage doors will not open. Security systems go offline. Alarm systems go silent. Electronic door locks on apartment buildings and offices stop functioning. Gas stations cannot pump fuel because the pumps are electric. ATMs cannot dispense cash because they run on electricity and network connections that no longer exist. Point-of-sale systems at every grocery store, pharmacy, restaurant, and retail shop go down, which means credit cards and debit cards stop working. In 2026, roughly 80% of all consumer transactions in the United States are electronic. When the grid goes down, 80% of commerce ceases to function within the first hour. And here is the thing that most people do not understand because they have never experienced it. The silence. Modern life has a constant electrical hum that you do not notice until it disappears. The refrigerator, the HVAC system, the computer fan, the background noise of a functioning house, when it all stops at once, the silence is disorienting. And in that silence, the first realization arrives. You are alone with whatever you have in your house right now. The food in your pantry, the water in your pipes which will flow for a while on residual pressure but will stop when the pumps at the treatment facility lose power. The cash in your wallet, the medications in your cabinet, the flashlight batteries in your drawer, the charge left on your phone, which you will instinctively check every 2 minutes, burning through the battery faster than you would on a normal day because your brain is searching for information that is no longer available. That is hour 1. And most people will spend it assuming the power will come back on soon. It usually does. But in the scenario I am describing, it does not. And the gap between assuming it will and realizing it will not is where the crisis begins. Hours 2 through 12, your water supply begins to fail, and most Americans do not have a backup. Most Americans do not know that their water supply depends entirely on electricity. Municipal water systems use electric pumps to move water from treatment plants through the distribution network to your faucet. When the power goes out, those pumps stop. There is residual pressure in the system that will keep water flowing for a period of time, usually a few hours depending on the size of the system and the elevation of your home. But once that pressure is exhausted, your faucet goes dry. And the water treatment plant itself, which uses electricity to run the filtration systems, the chemical dosing equipment, the UV disinfection systems, and the monitoring controls, stops treating water. Which means even if there is water in the pipes, it may not be safe to drink. Wastewater systems face the same problem. The pumps that move sewage from your house through the sewer system to the treatment plant are electric. When they stop, the sewage backs up. In low-lying areas, this can mean sewage flooding basements, streets, and public areas within 24 to 48 hours. The NIAC study specifically warned that water purification and wastewater systems are controlled by electronic systems that would be disabled in a grid failure, and that the loss of clean water would cause death within 3 to 4 days. 3 to 4 days, not weeks, days, and the average American household has virtually no water storage. A 2023 FEMA survey found that only 48% of Americans have a 3-day supply of water stored for emergencies. The recommended amount is 1 gallon per person per day for drinking and sanitation. For a family of 4, that is 12 gallons for 3 days. Most families do not have it, and if the power is out for longer than 3 days, even the families that do have water stored will begin running out. And here is the cascading effect that nobody talks about. Hospitals depend on water for surgery, sterilization, patient care, and sanitation. They have backup generators, yes, but those generators run on diesel fuel. And the diesel fuel is delivered by trucks, and the trucks run on diesel that is pumped from underground tanks at fuel depots by electric pumps that no longer function. So the hospital has a generator, but the generator has a limited fuel supply, and the fuel supply has no way to be replenished because the delivery infrastructure runs on the same grid that just failed. A congressional hearing on grid vulnerability heard testimony that after a major disruption, restoring service to water supply, treatment, and hospital customers would be a secondary priority behind restoring the grid itself. Secondary. Your water and your hospital are secondary, and the people who will suffer first and worst are the elderly, the disabled, the medically fragile, and the families with infants who depend on clean water for formula. Within 12 hours of a major grid failure, those populations are in immediate danger. And there is no cavalry coming because the cavalry runs on the same electricity that is gone. Day 2 through day 3, the food supply chain collapses and panic begins. The American food supply chain is a marvel of engineering that delivers 21 billion meals per month across the country using a network of warehouses, distribution centers, trucking fleets, and refrigeration systems that operate 24 hours a day, 365 days a year on electricity. When the power goes out, that network begins collapsing within hours. Refrigerated warehouses that store billions of dollars worth of perishable food begin warming immediately. Industrial refrigeration units are designed to maintain temperature only while powered. Without electricity, the internal temperature of a commercial freezer rises approximately 2 to 3 degrees per hour. Within 24 hours, frozen food begins thawing. Within 48 hours, meat, dairy, produce, and frozen goods are entering the temperature danger zone where bacterial growth accelerates. The same thing is happening in every grocery store, restaurant, school cafeteria, hospital kitchen, and home refrigerator in the affected area simultaneously. By day 2, the perishable food supply in the affected region is compromised. And restocking is not possible because the distribution system runs on diesel-powered trucks that cannot refuel because the fuel pumps are electric, on roads that are increasingly congested because the traffic signals are dark, and from warehouses that are themselves losing power and spoiling inventory. And the stores that are still open, if any, are operating on a cash-only basis because electronic payment systems are down. And 80% of Americans do not carry enough cash for a week's worth of groceries. And the stores that do accept cash will be emptied within hours by the first wave of panic buying. The average grocery store carries approximately 3 days' worth of food inventory for its customer base under normal purchasing patterns. Under panic conditions, that inventory is depleted in a single day, and the psychological shift that happens on day 2 is the one that changes everything. On day 1, people assume the power will come back on. They are annoyed. They are inconvenienced. They post about it on social media using the last of their phone battery. On day 2, the assumption begins to break. The phone is dead. The radio, if they have a battery-powered one, is broadcasting emergency information that does not include a restoration timeline. The food in the refrigerator is warm, the water pressure is dropping, and the realization sets in that this might not be a temporary disruption. It might be an event, and when that realization hits a population simultaneously, across an entire region, the behavior shifts from inconvenience to survival. And the shift from inconvenience to survival is where modern society's thin veneer of order begins to crack. Law enforcement during a multi-day blackout is stretched to the breaking point because officers are dealing with traffic chaos, responding to medical emergencies, protecting hospitals and water facilities, and trying to maintain order at stores and gas stations that are being overwhelmed by desperate people. And the officers themselves are affected. Their families are in the same blackout. Their children are in the same schools that are closed. Their homes are losing water and food just like everyone else's. And the dispatchers who coordinate their movements are operating on backup systems that are running out of fuel. And the jails and prisons in the affected area face their own crisis because the electronic locking systems, the security cameras, the communication systems, and the climate control that keeps inmates and staff alive in summer heat or winter cold all run on electricity. The Bureau of Justice Statistics reports there are approximately 1.9 million people incarcerated in the United States. In a widespread grid failure, the facilities holding those people face exactly the same cascading infrastructure collapse as every other building in the country. And the social fabric that holds communities together, the unspoken agreement that we all follow the rules because the systems that enforce the rules are functioning, that agreement begins to fray the moment people realize the systems are not functioning and may not function again for days or weeks. Day 3 through Day 7. Communications go dark and medical emergencies become death sentences. Cell tower backup batteries are rated for 4 to 8 hours under normal load. During a blackout, the load on those batteries spikes immediately as millions of people simultaneously try to call, text, and access the internet. That surge drains the batteries faster than their rated capacity. Some towers have small diesel generators that extend their uptime to 24 to 72 hours. But those generators need refueling, and the refueling infrastructure is part of the same grid that failed. By Day 3, the majority of cell towers in the affected area are offline. Landline phones, the ones that still exist, may function for a period because the telephone network has its own backup power at central offices. But the central office batteries are also finite, typically lasting 8 to 72 hours depending on the size of the facility and the load. By the end of Day 3, most of the communication infrastructure in the affected area is gone. And this is the moment that separates a blackout from a catastrophe. Because without communication, there is no coordination. Emergency services cannot dispatch because their computer-aided dispatch systems are down, and their radios depend on repeaters that are losing power. Hospitals cannot communicate with ambulances. Families cannot check on elderly relatives. Communities cannot organize. And the government cannot reach the population with instructions, updates, or warnings. A congressional hearing heard FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate testify that in a major grid failure, the primary link to the public would be battery-powered radios, and he acknowledged that most Americans do not own one. And the medical consequences of the communication blackout are immediate and lethal. There are approximately 4.4 million Americans who depend on electrically powered medical equipment at home. Ventilators, oxygen concentrators, dialysis machines, insulin pumps, CPAP machines for sleep apnea, nebulizers for asthma and COPD, powered wheelchairs. These are not conveniences. They are life support. The HHS Empower program tracks electricity-dependent Medicare beneficiaries, and their data shows millions of Americans whose lives depend on a functioning electrical grid every single day. When the power goes out for those people, the clock starts immediately. A ventilator patient has minutes without power before they are in respiratory distress. A dialysis patient has days before toxins accumulate to lethal levels. An insulin-dependent diabetic without refrigeration for their insulin supply has hours before the medication degrades. And those people cannot call for help because the phones do not work. They cannot drive to the hospital because the traffic signals are dark and the roads are gridlocked and the gas stations cannot pump fuel. They are trapped in their homes with medical equipment that has become furniture. And the hospitals that are supposed to receive them are running on generators that are burning through fuel they cannot replace. A 2023 study found that if a multi-day blackout in Phoenix coincided with a heat wave, nearly half the population would require emergency department care for heat-related illness. The researchers estimated 12,800 people in Phoenix alone would die. One city, one heat wave, and the current grid is more stressed than it has ever been in modern history. And here is something that haunts me when I think about it. There are approximately 15,600 nursing homes in the United States housing over 1.2 million residents, most of whom are elderly and medically fragile. Many of these facilities have backup generators that are designed for short-term outages of 8 to 24 hours. They are not designed for multi-day grid failures, and the staff-to-resident ratios in many facilities are already strained under normal conditions. During a blackout, staff cannot get to work because they cannot fuel their cars. Replacement staff cannot be contacted because the phones are down. Medication deliveries stop, medical supply deliveries stop. And the residents, many of whom have dementia, are immobile or require 24-hour nursing care, are trapped in buildings that are rapidly losing temperature control, losing water pressure, and losing the ability to maintain even basic sanitation. During Hurricane Irma in 2017, 12 residents of a Florida nursing home died after the facility lost air conditioning for 3 days. 12 people died because the air conditioning went out for 3 days. Now multiply that across 15,600 facilities during a regional blackout lasting 2 weeks, and the number becomes something that nobody in this country is prepared to confront. Day 7 through day 14, the financial system freezes and the economy as you know it stops existing. By the end of the first week, the financial infrastructure of the affected region has ceased to function. Banks are closed because their systems run on electricity and network connections that no longer exist. ATMs are offline. Credit and debit card processing is impossible. Online banking does not exist without internet. Payroll systems cannot process paychecks. Direct deposits cannot be made. Automatic bill payments cannot be debited. And the NIAC study warned that a prolonged blackout would freeze financial transactions across the national economy. The Federal Reserve's payment systems, the automated clearinghouse network, and the wire transfer systems that move trillions of dollars per day all depend on the electrical grid and telecommunications infrastructure. When both are down, money stops moving. Not in the affected area, everywhere that connects to the affected area. Because modern finance is interconnected. A bank in New York that cannot reach its branch in the blackout zone does not know the status of its loans, its deposits, or its obligations in that region. Insurance companies cannot process claims. Businesses cannot invoice or receive payment. Landlords cannot collect rent. Mortgage companies cannot process payments. And the workers who live in the affected area but work remotely for companies outside it cannot do their jobs, which means those companies lose productivity even though they still have power. The economic damage of a 2-week regional blackout would be measured in hundreds of billions of dollars. And the recovery would not be instantaneous because the financial records that were being processed when the power failed may be corrupted, incomplete, or lost. Transactions that were midstream freeze in limbo. Account balances become uncertain. And the trust that underpins the entire financial system, the assumption that your money is where you left it and that the number on your bank statement is accurate, erodes with every day that the system remains offline. And for the families living inside the blackout zone, the financial consequences are existential. They cannot access their money. They cannot pay for food even if food were available. They cannot pay for fuel even if fuel could be pumped. They cannot pay for medication. They cannot pay for anything. Cash, physical paper currency, becomes the only functioning medium of exchange, and the average American carries approximately $67 in cash, according to a Federal Reserve survey. $67. That is approximately 2 days of food for a family of 4 at current prices. After that, you are bartering. You are trading. You are operating in an economy that looks nothing like the one you woke up in 2 weeks ago. And if you think that scenario sounds extreme, consider that the Texas winter storm of February 2021 left 4.5 million customers without power, led to over 240 deaths, and caused an estimated $130 billion in economic damage. And that lasted approximately 4 days in a single state. Scale that to a regional event lasting 2 weeks, and you begin to understand the magnitude of what the NIAC was warning about when they used the phrase beyond modern experience. And here is the final financial consequence that nobody discusses. Insurance, homeowners insurance, business insurance, crop insurance, and commercial property insurance all depend on functioning communication and financial systems to process claims. In a 2-week blackout, no claims are filed, no adjusters are deployed, no payments are issued. The businesses that survived the blackout cannot access the insurance funds they need to repair damage and restock inventory. The families whose pipes burst, or whose food spoiled, or whose homes were damaged cannot file claims. The financial recovery from a major grid failure is measured not in weeks but in months and years because the systems that would facilitate that recovery are themselves victims of the failure. Why this is more likely now than at any point in American history, and what you can do before it happens. Everything I just described is not science fiction. It is the documented, studied, testified before Congress reality of what a major grid failure looks like. And the probability of such an event is higher right now than at any point in modern American history, for reasons that I have covered extensively on this channel, but that bear repeating in this context. The Department of Energy warned that blackout risk could increase 100 times if the current pace of power plant retirements continues, while demand from AI data centers surges. 104 gigawatts of firm generation capacity. Coal, natural gas, and nuclear are scheduled for closure in the next 5 years. The replacements coming online are predominantly wind and solar, which are intermittent and cannot provide the 24/7 baseload power that the grid requires during peak demand. The PJM interconnection, which serves 67 million people across 13 states, projects demand growth of 4.8% per year, driven almost entirely by AI data centers. And PJM has acknowledged that rolling blackouts may be necessary during both heat waves and extreme cold to protect the grid's integrity. And the war in Iran has added a layer of natural gas price pressure that makes every unit of electricity generated from gas more expensive. And the grid's physical infrastructure is aging. The average age of large power transformers in the United States is over 40 years, approaching or exceeding their designed operational lifespan. Supply chain constraints for replacement transformers mean that a failure does not get fixed in weeks, it gets fixed in months or years. And cyber attacks on grid infrastructure are not hypothetical. The Department of Homeland Security has documented ongoing probing and intrusion attempts by nation-state actors against American electrical infrastructure. The congressional hearing on grid vulnerability heard testimony that an adversary takeover of substation controls could disable aqueduct pumps, water and wastewater systems, and other essential services. And a severe geomagnetic storm, which is a solar event that occurs periodically and is not within human control, could induce currents in the grid that damage transformers across wide areas simultaneously. The Carrington event of 1859 occurred before the electrical grid existed. A similar event today would be catastrophic on a scale that no modern society has ever experienced. So what do? You prepare the way your grandparents prepared. Not with panic, with practicality. You store water, 1 gallon per person per day, for at minimum 2 weeks. For a family of 4, that is 56 gallons. You can buy water storage containers for less than $30. You maintain a supply of non-perishable food that your family actually eats. Canned goods, dried beans, rice, oats, peanut butter, canned tuna, crackers, dried fruit, enough for 2 weeks minimum. You keep cash on hand. Enough to cover a week of essentials at current prices. For most families, that is $200 to $500 in small bills. You own a battery-powered or hand-crank radio that can receive AM and FM frequencies because that will be your only source of information when the phones die and the internet is gone. You have flashlights and batteries or a rechargeable lantern. You have a basic first aid kit with any prescription medications you cannot go without for 2 weeks. If you have the means, a portable power station or small generator with stored fuel can keep essential devices charged and a small refrigerator running. And you have a plan, a written plan that your family has discussed. Where do we go if we cannot stay home? How do we contact each other if the phones do not work? Who do we check on in the neighborhood? What is our water supply? What is our food supply? How long can we sustain ourselves without outside help? Because the people who came through the Texas winter storm without loss of life were not the ones with the biggest houses or the most money. They were the ones who had water stored, food stocked, a heat source that did not depend on the grid, and a plan that everyone in the household understood before the crisis arrived. And the people who suffered the most, the 240 who died, were overwhelmingly elderly, medically fragile, and living alone without a plan, without reserves, and without anyone checking on them. That is the lesson of every grid failure in American history. The grid will fail again. The question is not if, it is when. And the answer to when does not matter nearly as much as the answer to are you ready. I am going to say this as directly as I can because I think it is the most important thing I have said in this entire video. The electrical grid is the single point of failure for modern American civilization. Everything depends on it. Your water, your food, your money, your communication, your transportation, your healthcare, your safety, your heat in winter, and your cooling in summer. Every system that keeps 330 million people alive and functioning runs through the same network of wires and transformers and substations that was designed in the mid-20th century for a fundamentally different level of demand. And that network is being stressed from every direction simultaneously. Demand is surging from AI data centers that consume as much electricity as small cities. Supply of firm baseload generation is declining as coal and nuclear plants close. Natural gas prices are elevated because of the war. Climate change is producing more extreme heat events and more severe winter storms that push the grid past its design limits. Cyber attacks are constant and escalating, and the physical infrastructure is aging past its operational lifespan. When you stack all of those factors on top of each other, the question is not whether the grid can handle everything being thrown at it. The question is how long it can continue handling everything before something breaks. And when something breaks, everything I described in this video happens, not in a theoretical future, in real time, to real people, in your neighborhood, on your street, in your house. The people who prepared will have water, food, cash, communication, light, and a plan. The people who did not will have a dead phone, an empty faucet, a dark house, and a growing realization that nobody is coming to help them for days or weeks because the systems that would send help are running on the same grid that just failed. Prepare now. While the lights are still on, while the water is still flowing, while the stores are still open, while the ATMs still work. Because the time to prepare for a grid failure is not during a grid failure. It is before one. And before is right now. Share this video with everyone you care about. Not because I want the views, because I want the people in your life to have water and food and cash and a plan when the lights go out. Because the lights will go out. They always do. And the only question that matters when they do is whether you are ready. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because I am going to keep tracking every threat to the grid in real time. The heat forecasts, the capacity data, the transformer age reports, the cyber threat assessments, all of it. No spin, no fear-mongering. Just the data and what it means for your family. Take care of yourselves out there. Prepare your homes.